Are you looking to learn Dataflow Gen2 in Microsoft Fabric? If you are, this is the right video to watch. Stay tuned. Welcome to the video. My name is Alex and on this channel I cover Microsoft Fabric and Azure related topics. In this video we will continue our DP-700 exam prep series and the link to the entire playlist can be found in the description. This is the episode 8 in this DP-700 exam prep series, and in this episode we will cover Dataflow Gen2. That is one of the main data transformation tools in Fabric. Like in every episode in this series, we will first start with the theory section, followed by demos/tutorials in Fabric, and then we end the episode with few questions related to topics covered in the episode, so that you can test your knowledge. But now let's get started. Here on the screen we can see how the Dataflow Gen2 development view looks in Fabric. As you can probably tell from the UI, this is a no/low code tool like the data pipeline tool that we covered in the previous episode in this series. However, the main difference compared to the data pipeline tool is that Dataflow Gen2 is packed with data transformation features. Dataflow Gen2 uses Power Query online to perform data transformations for the data, so that's why some of the elements in this UI might seem familiar to people who have been using Power Query in other tools like Excel and Power BI. But now let's take a bit closer look at the different elements in this Dataflow Gen2 UI. Let's start from the top where we have the Power Query ribbon. With this ribbon you can manage sources and destinations for the data flow and perform different kinds of transformations for the data like filtering, sorting, merging, pivoting, splitting and appending, to name a few transformations that you can do. But basically there is a vast selection of transformations that can be applied to the data. Next we have the queries pane that shows the different queries that we have in this specific data flow. Queries contain X number of steps or transformations that are done for the data. For this example we have 3 queries. The first 2 queries both read one CSV file and then do some transformations for the data, and then the third query merges the results of those 2 previous queries together and then does even more transformations for the data. And this thing that I just described can be seen quite easily in the diagram view of the UI. That is the next element in this UI I want to talk about. Diagram view allows you to visually see how the data sources are connected and the different applied transformations. This view can be turned on or off, but in my opinion this is a very helpful feature for understanding on high level what is happening in the data flow. Then below the diagram view we have the data preview pane. It shows only a subset of data to allow you to see which transformations you should make and how they affect the data. You can also interact with the preview pane and use it to do some data transformations for the queries. The data preview shows you how the data would look for the selected query after transformations have been done. In this case I have selected the merge query and this data preview shows the preview for it. Then the last element that we are going to talk about is this query settings pane. And like with the data preview pane, we can see the query settings for merge query, since in this screenshot I have it selected. In this pane each transformation is represented as a step, some of which are automatically applied when you connect to the data source. Depending on the complexity of the transformations, you might have several applied steps for each query. Most steps have gear icon that allows you to modify the step. Otherwise you must delete and repeat the transformations. Also in the query settings pane you can see a data destination option. That is a lakehouse in this example. And here we have now covered the very basic elements of the Dataflow Gen2. Next, let's talk about data sources for it. Since Dataflow uses Power Query as its engine, there are many different sources from which it can fetch data, and here on the screen we can see only a subset of those connectors, since currently there are over 100 different supported sources that can be used with Dataflow Gen2 with different authentication methods. Probably from this screenshot you can already spot quite a many familiar systems and services that are supported. And at this point Dataflow supports way more different sources than data pipeline tool that we covered previously. Also it is good to keep in mind that many on-premises sources will require adding a gateway that we are not going to talk about in this video. Next, let's talk about destinations for Dataflow. For destination side, we currently have only 5 supported connections that are Fabric Lakehouse, Fabric Warehouse, Fabric SQL Database, Azure SQL Database, and Azure Data Explorer. In the future, this destination list can change, but these are the currently supported destinations when filming this video. Data to these destinations can be written using either append or replace method, and the only exception here is that Azure Data Explorer doesn't support replace method, and data can be only written there using append. Also, some of the destinations support using dynamic schema for the data, meaning that when Dataflow writes data to a destination, new columns can be added to the table. Also, Dataflow can create new tables when writing data to a destination, but this currently has some limitations that, for example, creating a new database schema for the table is not widely supported, and Dataflow will write the tables to default DBO schema. Then next talk a bit about mQuery, that is the functional programming language used in Power Query that the Dataflow Gen2 is also based upon. This language is also called M language. The good thing to know here is that the Dataflow actually generates mQuery in the background when you are defining new queries in the UI. So Dataflow is actually just a visual tool for generating mQuery. However, it is not really mandatory to know how to write mQuery or even read it to use Dataflows, but this can be helpful in some cases. Also, the current iteration of DP-700 exam doesn't require you to know the syntax of mQuery. Then a bit about scheduling and running data flows. Of course, data flow can be triggered manually from the Fabric UI, but there are also other more sophisticated ways of running them. One way would be to schedule the data flow in a very similar fashion to a data pipeline and just to define a schedule from minute level all the way up to month level for your data flow. This would then run your data flow according to your schedule, and then you could monitor the run from the monitoring hub. The other way would be have the data flow as an activity in a data pipeline and then schedule and orchestrate the run with that data pipeline. This is my favorite way of using the data flow, since this allows the data flow to be a part of a bigger data solution that is being orchestrated by the data pipeline tool. And this was the last slide I had on this theory section today. There would be so many more things to talk about this tool, but since DP-700 doesn't require you to know this tool in very detailed level, let's end the theory section here, and next let's go to Fabric and do a demo/tutorial on this tool. Before we open Fabric, I would like you to know that I spent a ton of my free time creating these videos for you, and that's why I would like you to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more DP-700 and Fabric content. This doesn't cost you anything, and I would highly appreciate that. Also, if you'd like to support the channel with a cup of coffee, you can do so by clicking the Buy Me a Coffee link that can be found in the description. But now, let's go to Fabric. Now we're in Fabric, and here I have my DP-700 example workspace open. And let's start from my lakehouse, to which I have created this new folder called DP-700 Episode 8 folder. And in this folder I have two CSV files, departments.csv and employees.csv. And let's check out the contents of these files. In these files I just have few rows of data and a header. So we are going to use both of these files in our tutorial and build data flow by using these files here. And I have already used these files in a previous tutorial in this series, and these files can be found by clicking the link in the description that will take you to the Google Drive where these files are. But yeah, let's hit the create button here and let's create a new data flow to this workspace. And we're going to create the Dataflow Gen2 here. And first we would have to provide a name for our data flow. And then I'm going to enable these preview features for the data flow, since some of the features that are coming to the Dataflow Gen2 are still in preview, but they will be available for the data flow quite soon, I imagine, and I don't want this video to get outdated very fast. So we are going to just enable those preview features to have them available there for now. But yeah, let's hit create, and this will create a new data flow for us. And here we have this Power Query canvas to which we can start to develop our data flow. And here on the top we can see that Power Query ribbon that allows us to do some transformations and all kinds of things for our data. But let's start with our sources, since we want to get those CSV files here to the data flow so that we can start to work on those. And we can click this Get Data button here and we can select some more options that we have here. And here we can actually view all the sources that we currently have available for data flow. And we can see that we have quite an extensive set of sources available. And here are many different types of sources. And not all of these sources are very traditional database sources, so many many of these sources can provide some semi-structured data, like for example some JSON type data out of them. But yeah, for now we are going to actually use one of the Fabric sources. We are going to use the Lakehouse as our source here, and we are going to connect to Lakehouse that I just showed to you. That is in this DP-700 dev workspace. So here we can navigate and find that Lakehouse, and there it is. And there we can find the file section, and in this file section we are going to find that folder that I have created there, and there should be our CSV files. Then we are going to pick both of those files and then hit create, and this will then create those queries that are needed to fetch data out from those CSV files to this data flow. And when looking at our data in this data preview pane, we can see that the data doesn't look correct. We can see that the first row actually has our header, and we can actually fix that by clicking this use first row as header when we have this query active here. And we can click that, and then this should fix the issue that we're having with that header. And now we can see that that data looks a lot better. And we can also expand these queries and see all of the steps that we have here in the queries and see how does the data look after each step. And here we can see that when we apply that final step, then our data starts to look correct. And if we expand this department CSV here, we can see that we don't have that many steps here. And in this last step, we still have those headers on the first row. And we can do the same operations for it and click this use first row as a header. And then it will also change the data types at the same time, since it figures out that the department ID is actually a number data type. It did also automatically same thing to this other employee CSV data. And now we can minimize those, since we have now prepared the data to be ready to be merged together. So that is the next thing that we are going to do. So we are going to merge these data together by using the department ID. Since I want to join the values from this department CSV to this employees.csv. And we can actually use this merge queries options here and use merge queries as new. So we define a new query when we merge these two queries together. So let's do that. So now we select the employees CSV data here, and we select the column that we want to use for this merge statement. And we want to use the department ID. And then we select the right table for the merge, and that is going to be the departments CSV, and for that we are also going to select the department ID. And here we can see those typical SQL type of joins here that will be then used for that data. So if you're familiar with SQL joins, these will make a lot of sense for you. But yeah, then we have also these fuzzy matching options here that can match values if they are not entirely the same, but we are not going to use this feature today. And then we can hit OK, and then we should have that new query here called merge, and that will actually merge those together. And now we can see that our data looks bit funny here, since we have all the columns from the employees CSV, and then we have this department CSV attached here. And then we would have to expand this department CSV here so that we get those columns to the same level as those other columns are that are coming from the employee CSV. And we can use this data preview pane to do that transformation by clicking that expand button here. And here we can select all the columns that we want, and we can hit OK. And then this will actually add that expand step to this query there. And this is one example how you can also use this data preview pane to do some transformations for the data. Next, we can demonstrate another transformation. We can see that we have this name column here. Now I would like to split this name column to the first name and last name. And we can assume that we have the first name, and then we have the space, and then we have the last name, since this data is very simple. Of course, in the real scenario, that wouldn't probably the case. But this is a very simplified example what we can do here. So let's add that transformation there. So let's click this name column active, and then hit this plus button here, and then let's find that split by delimiter here. And then we are going to say that we want to split it by space. And then we can hit OK, and let's see what happens. Our query is again modified, and we have a new step there. and this step will split that name column. And then we see that now we have two name columns here. We have name.1 and name.2. And then I would like to rename these columns so that the name 1 is first underscore name, and then the name.2 is last underscore name. And again, this modified our query there a bit and added this rename column step there. Next, I would like to write this data to our destination, but I don't want to keep all of these columns here. I just want a few of them, so we can add this choose column step here. And we can, for example, select the employee ID, first name, last name, and then we can select the department name and the location. And then we can click OK, and this will again add a new step to this query here, and here we have the result of that query. And we can also expand this query settings pane here and see all the steps that have been applied to this query. And if I would click these other queries active here, we would see the steps that are in those queries. But yeah, now we're interested in this merge query here. And now I would like to define a destination for this query. This can be done by clicking this Add Destination button here. And here we can see all of those destinations that are currently supported in the Dataflow Gen2. I would like to choose the lakehouse to be our destination for this query this time. And I'll choose the lakehouse, and then we can click Next, and then we can find the same lakehouse from which we read those data from, but this time we are going to write a table there. As you can see, we have some different schemas for the existing tables that we have in that lakehouse that we have added there in the previous episodes in this series. The current minor downside with Dataflow Gen2 is that we cannot actually write a new table to any other schema than DBO schema. So we cannot use this three-part naming convention here and say that we want to write our table to this DP-700 episode 8 schema and then say .table, for example. It doesn't accept this. We just have to provide the table name and then it will write it to a DBO schema. That is a bit bad in my opinion, and I hope this will be fixed at some point. But yeah, I'm going to write this one table to that DBO schema, and I'm going to rename that table so that I know that it is tied to this specific episode that we are currently doing. But yeah, this is going to be the table name that we are going to use. And we are going to select this Lakehouse DP-700 to be the destination for this table. Then we can click Next, and then we can adjust these settings for writing the data. We can actually untap this Use Automatic Settings and see that we can actually use the append and replace method. And then we have also the possibility to use the dynamic schema or the fixed schema. This means that if we would use the dynamic schema and there is a new column coming in from our source, then this will be automatically added to the table to which we are writing the data to. But for now, we can use those automatically applied settings that are replaced and use dynamic schema there. So we are going to go with those settings. And here we can see how does the column mapping go, and here we could actually do some slight changes to the data types if we want. But for now, we don't want to do any changes to those data types. So we can save these settings. And this will then add this destination for our data flow. And now we are done with our data flow. Before running this data flow, let's check out a few more things about the UI. And here in the View tab, we can just modify things that we are seeing here. For example, we can disable this diagram view here if we want, but in my opinion, it is a very helpful feature to have. And also here we can see a bit more of that M query if we choose this query script or step script here to be available. Remember that this is generating this M query on the background when you are creating these queries here in the visual UI. But yeah, let's have that as step query there. Also, we have the possibility to open the advanced editors and make changes to this query here directly if we know what we are doing. But yeah, this is an advanced feature that we are not going to use in this tutorial. So let's hit cancel. And like said, this tool is packed with features and there would be many other things that we could cover in this video if we wanted to, but since DP-700 exam doesn't require you to know this tool in that very fine level, we are just going to cover the necessary parts of it. But yeah, now we can go back to the Home tab and we can actually hit this Save and Run button. That will actually trigger a run for this data flow immediately, and we can soon see did it went through okay or did it fail or what happened. But yeah, now that data flow should be actually running, and we can see from here the recent runs and we can observe what is happening there. And here we should see that this data flow is running quite shortly when we refresh this page here. And there we see that now that is running. And now let's wait that this data flow finishes and then we can go check out our lakehouse. Do we have that table there that we wanted to write there? But yeah, it will take a little moment this one to finish. And now after a little while our data flow has succeeded and we can go check out our lakehouse. Do we have that data there? And this would be added to our DBO schema. Like I described, that we cannot add new tables to any other schemas than DBO, since that writing doesn't support that two-part naming convention. And here we should be able to see the data that we wrote here using our data flow. And here we have that data that we created using our data flow by combining those two CSV files now in this delta table here in our lakehouse. But yeah, let's go back to our workspace, and if we would like to schedule our data flow, we could click these three dots here and then define a schedule for it using a very similar scheduling feature like we had with the data pipeline tool that we covered in the previous episode. And next, let's have a couple of questions related to Dataflow Gen2 so that you can test your knowledge. But before we do that, I'd like to tell you about this website that I have created with few of my friends called certiace.com. This website actually provides some free practice questions for Microsoft certification exams like DP-700 and DP-600. Go check out certiace.com after watching this video. But now let's have those practice questions. Our first question today is, which of the following is not part of the Dataflow Gen2 UI in Microsoft Fabric? A. Data Preview pane. B. Query Settings pane. C. Query Development Canvas. D. Power Query Ribbon. Now think about the answer for a moment and pause the video. I will reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. The correct answer is C, Query Development Canvas, since all the others are elements of Dataflow Gen2 UI. The element that allows you to visually see those queries on the canvas is called a Diagram View and not Query Development Canvas. Refer back to the first slide in the presentation if you want to recheck these elements. Let's have another question about Dataflow Gen2. Which of the following statements is true about Dataflow Gen2 in Microsoft Fabric? A. Dataflow Gen2 supports both append and replace update methods for all the destinations. B. Dataflow Gen2 only supports structured data sources. C. Dataflow Gen2 allows defining transformations visually, but it automatically generates mQuery in the background. D. Unlike Power BI data flows, Dataflow Gen2 relies solely on SQL-based transformations. Now think about the answer for a moment and pause the video. I will reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. The correct answer is C. Dataflow Gen2 allows defining transformations visually, but it automatically creates mQuery in the background. The option A is incorrect since Dataflow doesn't support both append and replace for all destinations. Option B is incorrect since Dataflow supports other sources than structured ones also. Finally, D is incorrect since Dataflow Gen2 also uses Power Query and not SQL-based transformations. And that is all that I wanted to cover today. If you'd like to continue your journey towards that DP-700 badge, check out the next video in this series. Now, I thank you for watching and see you in that video.